The Quran is a book of miraculous scientific knowledge, is what Muslim scholars tell us. But something amazing happens when we take a closer look at the miraculous scientific knowledge in the Quran. Want to see a magic trick? Shaykh Uthman ibn Farooq is my favorite sheikh. He gives my favorite kind of dawah. You Muslims who aren't supporting him should be ashamed of yourselves. The man is a national treasure. You need to convince him to do dawah full time. At the very least, subscribe to his channel and share his videos. Now, Shaykh Uthman is a busy man, but he has generously offered to take some time out of his busy schedule to answer some of my questions about his arguments. He said that I don't need to come all the way to California to ask a question or raise an objection. Instead, I can just send him questions or objections by email. I'm sure he was thinking that I would just write some emails and that he would write me back, but I'd rather put my question or objection into a video so that everyone can see it. And if Shaykh Uthman wants to respond with a video or an email, everyone can see his video, or if it's an email, I'd be happy to discuss his response in one of my videos. One of my primary interests is the arguments that various people use to show that their positions are true. This is why I like to talk to Muslims who give dawah. I want to examine their arguments. Some of their most popular arguments are about the miraculous scientific knowledge in the Quran. The Quran, according to Muslim apologists, is filled with scientific statements that couldn't possibly have been known by an illiterate caravan trader in 7th century Arabia. Hence, the Quran must come from God. So, Muslims give us these arguments. But if we actually examine them, there's a recurring pattern. Quite frequently, simply reading the entire verse or reading the surrounding context completely refutes the argument. This leaves us thinking that these arguments are based on sheer deception, and we end up not trusting Muslim apologists very much. We end up thinking of them as something like crafty used car salesmen, something like con men. But now we're in a much better position to examine these arguments because we have a Muslim scholar, Shaykh Uthman ibn Farooq, who has already made videos presenting a number of arguments for miraculous scientific knowledge in the Quran and who can help us understand them when we get confused. Let's jump right in and look at one of these arguments. In a video titled Quran and Science, an Interesting Study, the link is in the description box, Shaykh Uthman argues that Surah 41, verse 11 of the Quran is confirmed by a modern scientific theory about the origin of our solar system. He begins by raising a question.
So we look at scientific research in astronomy. What is the origin of the universe, the galaxy, the planets?
Notice, Shaykh Uthman asks about the origin of the universe, the galaxies, the planets. This is going to turn out to be a problem because he's about to present a theory about the formation of the solar system and pretend that it applies to the entire universe.
Today, the accepted theory today is called the Nebular Hypothesis. And according to this, the sun and the planets in our solar system began as a giant cloud of smoke. And then it came together as bodies, for example, planets and solar systems and galaxies.
What just happened? Shaykh Uthman correctly stated that the Nebular Hypothesis is a theory about the formation of our solar system, but then he goes on to pretend that the cloud of smoke that formed our solar system somehow formed entire galaxies.
The sun and the planets in our solar system began as a giant cloud of smoke, and then it came together as bodies, for example, planets and solar systems and galaxies.
The other problem is that he describes the Nebular Hypothesis as the claim that our solar system began as a cloud of smoke.
The sun and the planets in our solar system began as a giant cloud of smoke.
No, smoke is given off by the burning of organic material, things like wood, paper, coal, meat, and so on. The burning of organic material gives off small particles of carbon and carbon compounds. We don't refer to ordinary gases as smoke. There are all kinds of gases around you right now. You don't say that you're surrounded by smoke. We don't call hydrogen gas smoke. When you have a balloon filled with helium, you don't say that it's filled with smoke. The nebular hypothesis claims that our solar system began as a cloud of gases and debris, certainly not as a cloud of smoke. However, in the spirit of generosity, we're going to call the gases of the nebular hypothesis smoke so that Shaykh Uthman can make his argument. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that our solar system began as a cloud of smoke. Where's Shaykh Uthman going with this? First, a little background.
This theory was proposed by Emanuel Swedenborg, and then Immanuel Kant in 1755 he published this.
The nebular hypothesis now is significantly different from the hypothesis offered by Swedenborg and Kant, and there are critics of the hypothesis, but we'll ignore all of that because we want the argument. So, the solar system began as smoke. Now what?
1,100 years, 1,100 years before them, the Quran, it stated, ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى إِلَى السَّمَاءِ وَهِيَ دُخَانٌ. What is the Quran? And I'm going to give you the chapter and verse numbers so you can look it up yourself.
Oh, we're going to look it up, Sheikh.
In the 41st chapter, in the 11th verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He directed Himself towards the heavens and they were smoke.
Allah directed Himself towards the heavens and they were smoke. What does our somewhat generous version of the nebular hypothesis claim? That the solar system began as smoke. Take it home, Sheikh.
So how could a man in a desert who was illiterate and had no literature, no scientific evidence, no scientific works around him, no scientists around him, no scientific research going on in a desert, have known that? 1,100 years before people like Immanuel Kant, with all their scientific research and books and libraries working on the works of other scientists, came up with this.
Well, arguments for the divine inspiration of the Quran don't get more powerful than that. However, as is typically the case with these scientific miracle claims, Shaykh Uthman didn't quote the entire verse, let alone the surrounding context. If we want to know whether the Quran is truly confirmed by modern science here, we'll need to read what the verse actually says in context, and we'll need to know at least some basic information about the nebular hypothesis. Let's start with the most basic information about the nebular hypothesis. If you spent 2 or 3 minutes searching for basic information about the nebular hypothesis, what would you find? If you go to a university website, you'll find something like this. This is from the Columbia University website. About 4.6 billion years ago, our solar system formed from a cloud of gas and dust, which slowly contracted under the mutual gravity of all of its particles. The cloud was made largely of hydrogen with some helium and small amounts of the remaining naturally occurring chemical elements. The elements larger than helium had to have been produced in a supernova. So, elements in the cloud of smoke larger than helium had to come from a supernova, an exploding star. Even if you just go to Wikipedia, you'll find interesting information about the nebular hypothesis. For instance, a sun-like star usually takes approximately 1 million years to form, with the protoplanetary disk evolving into a planetary system over the next 10 to 100 million years. So, if you spend just a few minutes gathering the most basic details about the nebular hypothesis, you learn that, according to the theory, there were already lots of stars for billions of years. Those stars exploded, some of the debris coalesced in a certain area of space. A new star formed after 1 million years or so, and the planets were up and running much, much later. What's the sequence of events? Stars explode, cloud of smoke, new star, then planets, including Earth. That's the hypothesis that supposedly confirms Surah 41, verse 11 of the Quran, right? What was that verse again, Sheikh?
In the 41st chapter, in the 11th verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He directed Himself towards the heavens and they were smoke.
Here it is in the Quran. Notice that I blocked everything that Shaykh Uthman left out. Watch what happens if we simply finish reading verse 11. Then He turned to heaven while it was smoke, and said unto it and unto the earth, Come willingly or unwillingly, They said, "We come willingly." That's strange. The earth was already there alongside the cloud of smoke. According to the Nebular Hypothesis, was the earth already there alongside the initial cloud of smoke? Maybe we could try to fix this problem by saying that Allah was speaking to the particles in the cloud that would eventually become earth. Will that help? Here's an idea. Let's start 2 verses earlier and read the passage to see what's going on and to see if this really lines up with modern science. Starting in verse 9, say, "Do you indeed disbelieve in the one who created the earth in 2 days? And do you set up equals unto him? That is the Lord of the worlds." So, Allah created the earth in 2 days. What did he do then? He placed firm mountains therein, rising above it, blessed it, and apportioned its means of sustenance therein in 4 days, alike for all who ask. So, Allah created the earth in 2 days. Then, over the next 4 days, he set up all the mountains and provided sustenance, delicious food for all the creatures who would need it. What did he do next? Then he turned to heaven while it was smoke, and said unto it and unto the earth, "Come willingly or unwillingly." They said, "We come willingly." So the earth was up and running, but the heaven was still just smoke. This is starting to not sound like the Nebular Hypothesis at all. Then he decreed that they be 7 heavens in 2 days, and revealed to each heaven its command. And we adorned the lowest heaven with lamps and a guard. That is the decree of the mighty, the knowing. Wow, so Allah turned the smoke into the 7 heavens after he set up the earth. He adorned the lowest heaven with lamps, referring to the stars. The lowest heaven, which contains the stars, is the universe that we're familiar with. This means that the 7 heavens and the stars came after the earth. This is why Shaykh Uthman thinks that the cloud that formed our solar system also formed other solar systems and galaxies. The smoke of verse 11 became the entire universe.
The sun and the planets in our solar system began as a giant cloud of smoke, and then it came together as bodies, for example, planets and solar systems and galaxies.
Putting all of this together, Allah created the earth, complete with mountains and various foodstuffs. Then Allah turned to the rest of the universe, which was a cloud of smoke, and he created the 7 heavens and filled the lowest heaven with stars. What's the sequence of events according to the Quran? The earth is up and running. Then Allah turns to the universe, which is just smoke, and organizes it. Then stars. Earth comes first. What was the sequence of events according to the Nebular Hypothesis? Stars are up and running, then stars explode, then a local cloud of gases and debris come together, then a new star, then Earth. Earth comes last. The Quran states the exact opposite of what the Nebular Hypothesis claims. So here's the methodology of many of these scientific arguments for the divine inspiration of the Quran. Step 1. Go to a passage of the Quran. That passage might contain 10 different claims. Find the one that you can somehow, by some stretch of rhetoric, link to a modern scientific theory, and then ignore everything else in the passage. Step 2, go to a modern scientific theory. That scientific theory might make 10 different claims. Find the claim that you can somehow, by some stretch of rhetoric, link to a verse of the Quran, and then ignore everything else in the theory. Step 3, announce to your listeners that the Quran has been confirmed by modern science, but only share the tiny part of the Quran passage that you can link to some scientific theory, and only share the tiny part of the scientific theory that you can link to the Quran. Under no circumstances do you give your listeners the rest of the Quran passage or the rest of the scientific theory, because that would completely destroy the illusion. That's what this looks like to a novice like myself. But now we have a Muslim scholar who can clear things up for us. Shaykh Uthman ibn Farooq is the teacher, I am the student. So I ask him, Shaykh Uthman, why didn't you quote the entire verse, and why didn't you quote the entire passage? And once we read the entire passage, do you really think it's confirmed by modern science? And what about all of the parts of the nebular hypothesis that completely contradict the Quran? Are those parts of the theory wrong? If so, why would you appeal to a theory that's full of holes? I humbly await your response, Shaykh Uthman. Teach me your dawah ways. What I find most interesting in all of this is the difference between the fans of these scientific arguments and non-Muslims. You can line up 100 of Shaykh Uthman's fans. You can show them what the verse says in context. You can explain what the nebular hypothesis actually claims. You can show them that the Quran says the exact opposite of what the nebular hypothesis claims. And then you can ask them, is it really reasonable to go to a passage that completely contradicts the nebular hypothesis and then to cherry pick one part of one verse that you can make sound as if it lines up with the nebular hypothesis and then to claim that the Quran is confirmed by the nebular hypothesis? Is this really a good methodology for getting to the truth? 100 out of 100 Shaykh Uthman fans will tell you, yes, this is a wonderful methodology. This is how dawah is done. It says smoke that's close enough to something from the nebular hypothesis. Who cares what the rest of the passage says, and who cares what the rest of the theory says? This is a clear and indisputable sign from Allah. How can you reject it? Are you an Islamophobe? But if you line up 100 non-Muslims and you show them what the verse says in context, and you explain what the nebular hypothesis actually claims, and you show them that the Quran says the exact opposite of what the nebular hypothesis claims, and you ask them, is it really reasonable to go to a passage that completely contradicts the nebular hypothesis, and then to cherry pick one part of one verse that you can make sound as if it lines up with the nebular hypothesis, and then to claim that the Quran is confirmed by the nebular hypothesis? Is this really a good methodology for getting to the truth? 100 out of 100 non-Muslims will say, oh my goodness, that's so deceptive. Is this really what they do in their dawah? Now, here's the golden question. If 100% of the fans of a particular approach think that their methodology is absolutely spot on, and 100% of other people think that the methodology is awful and stupid and deceptive, what accounts for the massive difference in perspective? In other words, how does a person go from thinking that verses should be read in context and compared accurately with scientific theories, if you're going to claim scientific confirmation, to thinking, Alhamdulillah, the verse said smoke, it's a miracle. Who cares what the rest of the passage says? Who cares what the scientific theory actually says? It's a miracle. That's all there is to it. Only possible explanation. Why the radical shift in methodology? Let me know what you think in the comments section. And welcome to Dawah.